interactive session as far as possible. So whilst I will be starting the conversation with Vint in a moment or two, I want you to become ready, prepared to ask your questions. We don't want any awkward silences or pauses, so be ready to ask a question. I will apologise in advance. I will not get to everyone in the room. And therefore, to be as fair as possible to others, please do not stand up and make a speech. Ask a nice, short, sharp question, because we're really here this evening to hear what Vint's got to say to us. Vint, welcome to the University of Reading and the Henley Business School. We're delighted to have you here this evening, and honoured indeed, given the many things that you've achieved in your life. But before we get into some of that, perhaps you would tell us a bit about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, and what you did as a child and a teenager before you embarked on this great life of innovation.
Well, thank you for that. I'm really delighted to be here. It's not our first visit to Henley. I'm Henley, rather, on Thames. But I must say it's the first opportunity to visit the university, so we're really delighted. Thank you so much for the invitation. Well, the short story is that life began in 1943 at Yale Hospital. In the middle of World War II, my father was fighting in the European theater, and my mother and I were staying with her father in New Haven, Connecticut. After the war, they moved to Los Angeles. I'm not going to go through 70 years here. So I grew up in the Los Angeles area, in the San Fernando Valley. Went to high school there. Three of my good friends at Van Nuys High School ended up at UCLA. And in fact, the three of us, Steve Crocker, John Postel, and I, became the Van Nuys High School Mafia at UCLA during the development of the ARPANET, which was the predecessor to the internet. So there's this funny little situation in the San Fernando Valley. I had a really lovely childhood. When I was 11 years old, 10 or 11, I got a Gilbert chemistry set. Now, back in those days, this would have been like 1953, you got some really cool chemicals in those sets. Things that were hypergolic, that when you mix them together, they go boom. So, glycerin and potassium permanganate and powdered aluminum and magnesium, and we made, thermite grenades and little volcanoes out of plaster of Paris. So blowing things up, was a favorite pastime. And as it turns out, later on, blowing up businesses with new technology was also an element of fun in the internet world. But I was especially fortunate because my father worked for a company called North American Aviation. This was a company that had several different subsidiaries that were involved in the Apollo program. So at the ripe old age of 17, while I'm still in high school, I got to work on the F1 engines of the Apollo system. My job was to go analyze the data coming from the test firings of this 1.5 million pound thrust engine in a fixed jig in the Santa Susana Mountains. And when you fire that thing off, your whole body is going like this, even if you're 300 yards away. So I imagined in 1960 what it might be like 20 years later, hoping that we would be sending rockets off to the moon and the planets by 1980. Of course, that didn't happen, although we did land on the moon about 10 years later, which was pretty exciting. So I had this wonderful opportunity to be exposed to that sort of space-based business. I was a science fiction fan, and so it was like living a little bit in a science fiction story. And after that, I went to Stanford University and did my undergraduate work in mathematics. I took as many computing classes as I could. And when I graduated, I went to work for IBM in Los Angeles, at what was called the Los Angeles Data Center. And after 2 years, I realized that I really needed to know more about the theory of computing, operating systems, programming language design, compilers, and so on. And I returned to UCLA. I went to UCLA for graduate work. And that's where I encountered my friends from Van Nuys High School again and the ARPANET project, which led to packet switching and protocol design. So when I finished my PhD at Stanford, I went up to, PhD at UCLA, I went up to Stanford University to join the faculty. And that's where Bob Kahn, my colleague, and I began to work on the internet design. That was in 1973, and if I could, I don't want to go on forever and ever here, but there are some interesting dates that I have found surprising. 1973 is when Bob Kahn and I began the design of the internet to see how we could get an arbitrarily large number of packet switch nets to interconnect in a very uniform way. Ironically, 1973 was also the year that the mobile handheld telephone was designed at Motorola. And so, of course, I didn't know that that was going on at the time, so these things are going along in parallel. And then in 1983, after 10 years of work on the internet, we were able to turn it on. And this was the same year that the mobile handheld telephone was turned on and the service was offered. So I actually was invited to lunch in 1983 by a friend of mine who had obtained one of these mobile telephones. The thing was about this tall, had a whip antenna, weighed about 2.5 to 3 pounds. And so I didn't know what this was. I was called, come and have lunch, I have something to show you. So I sat down and there's this thing sitting on the table. What's that? He said, it's a mobile telephone. I said, well, don't those require the boot of a car full of electronics and everything? So no, you can hold this in your hand. So I kept asking questions, and finally he said, I don't know the answer. Why don't you call the guy that invented it? So he picked up the phone, and I called the guy that invented it, and we chatted for a bit. So there have been these wonderful parallels that, over the years. It tells you that technology happens when it's feasible, when the conditions are right, when things have matured sufficiently, or when the economics have reached a certain point. Some of these capabilities become feasible, and sometimes they get invented in parallel. Not that the mobile phone and the ARPANET or the internet are identical, but they have now merged in a very strong way because everyone sitting in the room has a mobile. It's probably a smartphone. It's in fact a mutually reinforcing pair of technologies where the mobile phone gives you access to internet anywhere that you can reach a base station, and all of the information on the internet, all of the horsepower, the computing, and the data is available to the mobile phone, making it even more valuable.
It's interesting because when you look back, you might think it was inevitable that things would end up the way they ended up when it came to the internet. Did you have even a sneaking suspicion that this technology had the capacity to create a revolution?
So one trivial answer would be no, but that would be wrong. Another trivial answer would be yes, but that would be overstating the case. But you do need a little context. The ARPANET project began in 1969. It was a Defense Department project to hook computers together in a network for the purposes of resource sharing. The American Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency was funding research in computer science and artificial intelligence around a dozen universities around the United States, with names that you would recognize: Stanford University, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Caltech, and so on. And every one of the computer science departments said every year to ARPA, we need a world-class latest computing capability in order to do world-class research. And even ARPA couldn't afford to buy a $6 million machine every year for 12 universities, so they said, we're building a network and you can share computing resources and software. And everybody protested, but they went ahead and built the ARPANET. So this resource sharing system started in 1969. When I was at UCLA, I wrote the software for the first node, the first host computer to connect to the first node of the ARPANET. But within a month, SRI International was connected, and so we had a little two-node network, and then soon thereafter, UC Santa Barbara and University of Utah. Now, the reason these are important is that at SRI International, a man named Douglas Engelbart was working on something called the online system. And although you may not have heard of him, he was about 20 to 30 years ahead of his time. He was starting around the late 1950s and early 1960s, believed that computing was not just about numbers. It was about non-numerical processing. So he built this online system on a single computer, but it had the following characteristics. You could create documents, text documents, with images and things like that. You could create hyperlinks between the documents. So he had invented hyperlinking in the 1960s. He invented the mouse so that you could point to something please pay attention to this place in the document, I want you to do something. He had a 5-fingered keyboard that allowed you to enter commands using the binary code instead of using a keyboard. And he had a foot pedal. And the foot pedal was to make characters that would normally be invisible on the screen, like tabs and character turns, visible. So when you were editing, you could actually see which blank characters or hidden characters were present. This is amazing. So he did a demonstration in 1968. And those of you who are interested in a little bit of history, go look for the mother of all demos. Just look that up on Google. And you will see a video of Engelbart demonstrating the system. He got a standing ovation because no one had ever seen anything like this. For all practical purposes, it was World Wide Web in a box. And we were using it on the ARPANET. Now, if you don't mind, one more little element to this. While I was at Stanford University, Xerox Palo Alto Research Center was a mile and a half from my laboratory. And I knew the people working there because they were from the same community that had done the ARPANET. Well, in that laboratory, Bob Metcalf was inventing the Ethernet again in 1973. There's something interesting about 1973. Our oldest son was born in September of 73 too. So he wants to know whether he's the brother of the Internet. Somebody else keeps asking, who's the mother of the Internet? I'm not sure I know the answer to that. He's a lesson secret. So anyway, Xerox PARC. First of all, they get this Ethernet going, 3.3 megabit per second coaxial cable system. Then they decide everyone should have his own computer. So they invent the Alto machine. It's a personal computer in 1973. It's a $50,000 box. Every single employee in the company at Palo Alto Research Center got one. And so they were inventing applications like WYSIWYG. You know, what you see is what you get editing. You know, multiple fonts and all this other stuff. The guy that did that went up to Microsoft actually later on and did Microsoft Word. So we were seeing the use of personal computers, high-speed local networks, WYSIWYG computing, black on white presentations and everything else, in addition to this World Wide Web in a box. At the point where we're starting to do the internet design, electronic mail has been invented for 2 years, 1971. So we're living in an environment that the rest of the world wouldn't see for 20 years. So the answer to your question is, yes, we had a pretty damn good idea how powerful this technology could be. Couldn't predict everything, but it was worth working on.
Okay, I'm going to put the audience on notice that in a moment or so I'm going to invite the first questions, but Vint, you must have the coolest job title of anyone. Google's Chief Internet Evangelist.
How did that happen?
Explain that.
Well, when I joined Google in 2005, they said, what title do you want? And I said, well, how about Archduke?
Remember what happened to him?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what happened. Larry and Eric and Sergey came back and they said, you know that the previous Archduke was Ferdinand and he was assassinated in 1914 and it started World War I. Maybe that's not a good title to have. Why don't you be our Chief Internet Evangelist? I said, okay, I know how to do that. So that's where that title came from. It has had a few little ups and downs. I was lecturing in Moscow a couple of years ago, 2010, and 4 times in public, in the Q&A part of my lectures, I was asked, do you believe in God? Because they thought that I was a religious evangelist using the internet. So I thought, well, how shall I respond to that? And I said, let me explain. I'm geek orthodox. And they seem to understand that.
Right, who's going to ask the first question, the audience? Guy.
We've got a microphone on it. Guy,